All right. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to see as many people on the call tonight as we have. So I'm so glad that you could join us, and my heart is always full when I know that we are going to be doing an episode of our virtual events surrounding food. And I bet you guys are all excited about that as well. I have a little bit of introductory material that I will go over, and then I'm going to hand it off to our esteemed colleagues down at the Levi Jordan Plantation State Historic Site and the Varner-Hogg State Historic Site. So let's get going. All right. Friends, we're so glad that you could be here with us tonight for our presentation, Buttermilk Pie, A Slice of Black Culinary Heritage. I'm Christy Poliquin, the Development Manager for the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission. We're so glad that you've stopped by, and we want you to get to know more about us and the work that we do. We are the nonprofit partner to the state agency, the Texas Historical Commission. We provide support for historic preservation efforts across the state, which we now have 40 state historic sites across Texas. We just got a new site recently, so we're up to 40. And we'd love for you to get to know each of those sites and how we work to support them. You can go to our website, thcfriends.org, and click on what we do. I also want to thank those of you who've chosen to support us through donations through these events. Big or small, those donations matter. Every dollar matters. So when you donate even just $5, it goes to support all the programs and the different efforts of the THC that we bring philanthropic support for. So thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge our colleagues at the THC who are with us here tonight, and Friends board members who are here, and also our THC commissioners who support the virtual events programs. If you haven't already followed us on social media, please do. We would love for you to learn more about us that way and connect. We have a pretty active social media account. It's also how you can find out about future events. For example, in December, we'll be hosting a virtual event called Home for the Holidays at Goodnight Ranch, Cultivating Community at the Dinner Table and Beyond. This is going to be the story of Mary Goodnight, and it comes to us from site staff up at Goodnight Ranch State Historic Site. And that will be on December 12th. So please register for that event if you haven't already. I can see that some of our folks in the audience tonight are some of our regulars, and I bet you they have already registered. So we're looking forward to that. A couple of housekeeping items before I hand it off to our presenter for the evening. We would appreciate it if you could keep your microphones on mute. That just helps us focus on our presenter and you not get distracted by other conversations going on. We always appreciate that. As the presentation is going on, if you have questions for our presenter, please put those into the chat. We will answer them in order that we receive them in the chat as soon as the presentation is done. And we'll answer as many as we have time for before we all turn into pumpkins at 7:30 p.m. But I imagine that we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So please do put your questions into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. I also wanted to let you know that tomorrow, usually by the afternoon time, everybody who's registered for this event will get an email from me, and that email will contain a link to a recording of tonight's event. So if you want to rewatch the video, the cooking video, if you want to make any kind of notes, that will be an easy way to do that. And you can also share that link with your family and friends, anybody who you think might be interested in watching that. So watch for that email tomorrow. If you don't see it by late afternoon, please check your spam or junk folders because sometimes our emails go there and I can't figure out how to make that not happen. So it is my pleasure tonight to introduce Maggie Brown. Maggie Brown is going to then introduce the other folks who are with her here tonight, including our featured presenter, Chef Natalie. Maggie Brown is the lead educator and interpreter at Varner-Hogg Plantation State Historic Site and Levi Jordan State Historic Site. And she is joined by Kennedy, but I think, Maggie, you're going to introduce Kennedy. Is that right?
Yes, I'll introduce her after my little spiel.
Sounds good. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. And thank you everyone that's joining us. I'm just going to briefly go over the history of the Levi Jordan plantation, just so y'all kind of have an idea of where we're coming from. So the Levi Jordan plantation is originally on a league of land. A league of land is 4,428 acres, and this league was given to Samuel May Williams, and he was part of Stephen F. Austin's Old 300 that settled in 1824. We're located in Brazoria County, Texas. Samuel May Williams never actually occupied the property, and it remained vacant until 1848. And in 1848, Levi Jordan purchased half the league, which is 2,214 acres. And Jordan and his son-in-law, James McNeil, owned two plantations in Louisiana and Arkansas. But by the end of 1849, they sold that property and moved to a log cabin here in Texas on their new property. The construction on the plantation house began in 1853, and that house is a two-story Greek Revival house. It's pretty basic. There's two rooms upstairs, two rooms downstairs. The enslaved laborers there at the plantation handmade all of the bricks for the chimneys and the foundations of that home and built the structure itself. And in 1860, the plantation was comprised of 600 improved acres. So that was the number of acres they were actually farming. And they produced 3,000 bushels of corn, 77 bales of cotton, and 193 hogsheads of sugar. And if you don't know what a hogshead is, it's the big barrels, the big wooden barrels. In 1860, there were 134 enslaved people on the property, and this number went up to 144 in 1861. So the plantation itself had the main house, the plantation house. There was a shop, a hospital building, a carriage house, stables, slave quarters, barns, a cotton gin, a sugar mill, and corn cribs. The only remaining building on the site today from that time period is the main plantation house. Today, the site also has a visitor center. That visitor center contains some of the artifacts from the Levi Jordan site in an exhibit space there that tells the history of this site. There's over 600,000 artifacts that have been uncovered on the Levi Jordan site since 1986 from various archaeological excavations that have taken place there. There's also an archaeology lab at the visitor center, and that is there to kind of show the lesser known aspects of archaeology. The lab is where archaeologists conserve and catalog the artifacts that are found there on the site. And more time actually goes into conserving and cataloging artifacts than into the actual excavations of those artifacts. But what survives in the written record is not always the whole story of what actually occurred at the site. The stories of the enslaved people, women, and children are not prevalent in historical literature and documents. And many times those people were unable to tell their own stories. But we use foodways as kind of a tool to be able to tell the stories of those people whose stories tend to be untold. Before we go on, I want to give a shout out to our other educator, interpreter, Ali Vanderheider. She did the work of filming and editing the video that you'll be seeing this evening. Our guest is Chef Natalie Wright-Moore Clark, who is a food historian and chef. She is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and the International Wine Guild in Colorado. Chef Natalie holds degrees in education, food science, and menu planning. She also holds advanced certification as an executive sommelier. She has over 20 years of experience in the culinary field, and she is a descendant of the Wright family who were enslaved at the Levi Jordan plantation. Before we get to the cooking demonstration, I'm going to turn it over to Kennedy Wallace, who is our assistant site manager here at the Varner-Hogg and Levi Jordan plantations.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Before we get into the video, I just wanted to go over what ADOR is, ADOR, and that stands for A Day of Remembrance. And A Day of Remembrance is the time we take to acknowledge and honor those who were enslaved and those who sharecropped at both the Levi Jordan and Varner-Hogg plantations. And originally, this was an event that happened predominantly at the Varner-Hogg plantation, going back to about the Texas Parks and Wildlife time. the community members, the elders within the community, they would have different remembrance days, but the actual event happened probably about a year or two before COVID. And of course, during COVID, it stopped. And then the year after that, that's when I started working on site, and I was asked to kind of help coordinate and start bringing back a Day of Remembrance. And this is how we engage with the community, because we're, like I said, we're honoring those who were enslaved, and we're starting the process of humanizing them. And as we're doing that process, starting that process of humanizing them, we're connecting multiple generations in a safe educational space. When talking about the plantation sites, we try to do the best that we can to provide a safe educational space, because we understand that whether you're a descendant of those who were enslaved, or descendants of the enslaver, or just descendants of people who were enslaved in general, it's very hard, and you could be feeling a lot of different emotions at once, a different thought process. They could be happy, sad, excited, anxious, confused. There's a lot of overwhelming emotions. So part of us creating a safe educational space is that making sure that they're safe to express their emotions, but also they receive the materials and the resources they need to further studies on their own or to learn new things. However, over the years, A Day of Remembrance was just having a moment of silence and fellowshipping in it, and coming together and engaging with people on sites. The last 2 years, we've built off of it more and more, and focusing more on this year. What we did was that we had workshops and presentations that focused on two different concepts that relate to each other, and that included genealogy for the Black community, as well as photo restoration preservation. And the way we came up with those two things is that the first thing is that we wanted to be a service to the community. We want to give back, and we know that we have the resources, we have the knowledge, where we're able to share that information so people can do that work on their own when they're trying to learn more about their ancestry and trace their family's genealogy, as well as utilizing materials that they already have in their home, like their iPhone, their computer, and just family photos in general, because if you know how to date that, you can figure out different timelines and identify different people within those photos. But being able to do that does build, being able to use those photos, you kind of have to know that they're in a safe, protected space. So with the workshops and presentations, that was the focus of those two things, was this is how you do your family genealogy, but also with the tools that you have in your home, this is how you preserve it, look after, and passing it on to the next generation. However, focusing more on food, a lot of times when you go to these plantation sites, when people talk about doing food waste, that opens the door for reenactments. And that's something we try to shy away from, to make sure that people are comfortable, because once again, we want to have that safe educational space. But just because it's a safe space doesn't mean that you can't learn. And so by using food, something that I always say to my coworkers is that it's hard to argue when there's a piece of cornbread in your mouth. Cornbread, depending on where you're from or how you relate to food in general, it offers a feeling like you feel safe, and it's very nostalgic. And so with food, it's not just that feeling of being nostalgic and feeling safe, but also there's a lot of history in that. And so as we do archaeology on site, and as we try to interpret the lives of the people who are enslaved, sometimes depending on how visitors may have been taught that information, there's a lot of dehumanization, even though they're not, just by talking about the enslaved people. So by bringing in that food component, and us being so fortunate to meet Natalie, we're able to use food to not only humanize these people, but debunk stereotypes, inform, connect generations, and humanize them, and just talk about their trades and skills. And that shows that these people who were enslaved, they had a life before and after, and that they're not just these individuals who didn't have any knowledge. And then adapting that for kids and teaching them more, it goes back to showing them that if times were different, this person who is an enslaved cook could have been a person who owns a 6-figure job. It just depends on what the time period was. But in all, this is how we're serving our community. This is how we're connecting with the community, and we're engaging with them. And by meeting Natalie and building that connection with her, not only are we learning about Black culinary excellence and food history, we're also learning more about the local community and how they do things, which, if you're going to talk about a plantation, it's kind of important to not just generalize all plantations. A plantation that you see in Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi is different from a Texas plantation. And one way we're able to do that is using food to describe those differences. But let's get into the video. And if you guys have questions at the end, we're all here to support you.
So my mother was a busy woman. She had 2 kids, a husband, and a full-time job. As a college-educated individual, she ran a multi-million-dollar company. Her cooking revolved around things that would... So my mother was a busy woman. She had 2 kids, a husband, and a full-time job. As a college-educated individual, she ran a multi-million-dollar company. Her cooking revolved around things that would make a large yield and were quick and easy. And she originally got this recipe from my mama Jean, and then there have been adaptations that have been made from that recipe. Officially, this is my mother's version of buttermilk pie, and her name is Evelyn, and she is a descendant of the Levi Jordan. And so we're just going to call it Evelyn's buttermilk pie, made by her daughter, Natalie. So first things first, we're going to preheat this oven. We're going to go bake, and we're going to go to 325. Always be sure to hit the start button. Very, very important detail. Just going to take butter. Well, actually, this is margarine. Bake with margarine, cook with butter. We're going to do 1.5 cups on the sugar. There is a difference. Dry cups for measuring dry ingredients. Cute little stacky cups. Measuring wet ingredients. So it's a tip. 1.5 cups on the sugar. Beautiful part about this pie, it does not have to be 100% precise. Our recipe says to cream that together. Got the butter in the oven, do a little melt, and then I'll be able to cream the butter and the sugar together. A little bit more success. While we're waiting, go ahead and crack some eggs. This is where I should have brought the trash can closer to me. Always after eggs, wash your hands. Quarter teaspoon on allspice. In this recipe, if you're a little bit over on the allspice, you'd be okay. Do a full teaspoon on the vanilla. Again, an ingredient you can be generous with, just depends on your taste. I have never had a more thoroughly sealed bag of flour. Flour, This is why you read your ingredients. You need 3 tablespoons buttermilk. You're going to use buttermilk powder, which is actual buttermilk. And the way you use the buttermilk powder is to measure out the amount of water that's in the recipe. So in this case, it's a cup. A cup of water. Buttermilk has a rich history, and it can be incorporated into a lot of dishes. In our house, it went with buttermilk pie and it went with cornbread. And then you add a teaspoon of buttermilk powder at a time until you get your desired consistency. Having the ingredients on hand to make a pie in under an hour is something that anybody from a stay-at-home parent to a working single individual can come home and be like, you know what, I can put that together. And it turns out wonderful and delicious every single time. This recipe is meant to be simple and made with ingredients that most people already have on hand. And at a time in history, the majority of people would have had that amount of time on their hand because a lot of scratch cooking was being done. And so buttermilk was a lot easier to come by at a period in time because you were making it on the farm. You would have fresh milk, you'd have fresh cream. If you go back far enough, people are churning their own butter. And the remnants that are left over from the butter being prepared is what is the buttermilk. These days, the things that we get in the stores is closer to a buttermilk alternative. And then, with this being a recipe, to bring it into today's time, having dried buttermilk on hand, shelf life is a lot longer. So you can buy enough buttermilk to get you through an extended period of time without having to worry about it taking up room in the fridge or going bad. Okay. So at this point, we've measured all of our ingredients. We're going to check on this butter. Okay. So we've got some heated butter. Sometimes there's just no reason to get fancy. So our flour. We're going to go back to the sugar. To the butter, we're going to add some sugar. 1.5 cups of sugar. Going to get our cups for measuring dry ingredients. We're going to pour 1 cup of sugar. Then we are going to pour 1/2 cup of sugar. It is very easy to tweak. This is the only recipe in my research that I've seen that uses the spice of allspice. A lot of them use nutmeg and cinnamon. And we're just going to mix those together. Again, it's not a fancy recipe. But I have yet to read a recipe, and of the 50 that I did read, none of them had allspice as the spice for the pie. And so I believe that that is the change that my mother made. Yes, you could do an electric mixer, you can do a KitchenAid, but there are no gadgets required to make this pie. Now we're going to do 3 tablespoons of flour. Flour is an ingredient that you want to be precise with. So we're going to get out our handy dandy leveler. got 1. Always check the recipe. Even if you know it by heart, even if you've done it 500 times. 2. 3. Our 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. And we're going to put in our tablespoon of vanilla. Just bring all of that together. Now is when it starts smelling delicious. Now, we're going to do a little whisk on our eggs. Give it a little stir. Now we've got our buttermilk. And so here we are with A Day of Remembrance and remembering the ways that food has enhanced our lives, added to it, become a part of our cultural story. And this particular buttermilk pie is just one that everybody loves. And in doing my research through the history of the buttermilk pie, it's rooted in English traditions. And so we can surmise how in a pie with an English history crossed over to African Americans with the knowledge that was brought with them on how to prepare crops that they brought with them and crops that they found here, and having to intermingle those ingredients in a way that was palatable not only to them, but to the people that they were charged with cooking for. That skill, that knowledge, that know-how gets passed down through the family. It's my least favorite pie to put in the oven. Oven is nice and hot at 325. You always twist liquidy pies into the oven instead of pushing them to avoid spillage. And we shall see that in 45 minutes. So you see it still has some jiggle to it. Still has some jiggle to it. Means it's not quite ready. This one's closer than this one. So we're gonna slide it back in for a couple more minutes. There she glows. Like 100%. Love it, love it, love it. And then, because Day of Remembrance last year, and this is how recipes shift and change, right? So if I were to make Natalie's buttermilk pie, this would be served with cinnamon butter on top. Because Day of Remembrance last year, buttermilk pie, but we also had sweet potatoes, baked sweet potatoes with cinnamon butter. Well, one of my assistants took cinnamon butter and a piece of pie and ate them together. And then she comes over to me and goes, "Eat this," and sticks it in my mouth. And so I'm like, "What am I eating? Oh my God, this is amazing." And she's like, "It's the cinnamon butter on top of the sweet potato pie. Or it's the cinnamon butter on top of the buttermilk pie." And I was like, "No way." And she was like, "Yes way." And I'm like, "The cinnamon butter on the pie, on the pie." I'm sold.
It's the
Like, I'm
allspice.
sold. Like, let's just not pretend it's healthy. Like, we're just not even going to have that conversation. We are going to put butter on the pie and eat it.
I'm going to jump in really quickly to let y'all know there's a question in the chat about whether or not we would be able to share the recipe. And yeah, that will, Chef Natalie is very graciously agreed to let us share this recipe. So we will share that in the follow-up email that I'll send y'all tomorrow. And all of us will show our gratitude by making buttermilk pie for Thanksgiving. All right, I'm gonna hand it back over to Natalie. Is it your turn to speak? Kennedy, what do we have next on our?
If Natalie has any closing remarks, we would like for her to take the stage. If not, we can get into Q&A.
I'm not sure that I have any closing remarks. I was kind of reading the chat as it was going. By all means, get into the powdered buttermilk. It is a lifesaver. It's going to save you budget wise. It's going to save you time wise. It's going to save you storage wise. Nobody knows the difference. I have made gravy with it. I have made pies with it. I have made biscuits with it. The powdered buttermilk is actual buttermilk. And the buttermilk that you get at the store is a variation of buttermilk that is created to serve the masses. So by all means, get into that powdered buttermilk. You will love it. I do promise. I do suggest that everybody make the pie for Thanksgiving. It's a hit. I have never seen anybody not like the pie. The thing that I will caution you about, because this is what happened in our family, is that people are going to love the pie. They are going to eat the pie, and then you are going to be left with no pie. So make yourself a pie and hide it. The other piece that I will tell you about this pie is that it gets better as time goes on. My mother would make us all pies. We each got an individual pie for Thanksgiving, and then we each got a pie to take home. And the pie that I would take home, I would stick it in a Ziploc baggie because the 9-inch pies fit perfectly into a gallon-sized Ziploc baggie. I'd stick it in the freezer, and I would cut pieces off of it as the year would go by. And the pie just gets better. It just gets better and better and better and better and better. So by all means, make the recipe, make yourself a pie, not just a piece. You'll be mad. And then stick it in the freezer and make that your sweet treat as you go throughout the year. I definitely hope that you are able to add this into your repertoire. It's not just for Thanksgiving, it's not just for Christmas, it's for birthdays, it's for potlucks, it's for anything where you need something where you can put it together and show up, and people will think you are a culinary wizard. So, by all means, take the pie, take the recipe. You could make adaptations. Like I said on the video, this particular pie does use the allspice. It is the only pie that I saw that used the allspice in the research that I have done. Most of them use cinnamon or nutmeg, and you are allowed to make the adaptations that you want to make for your palate to the taste that you like. So go forth, play in the kitchen, bring your family in, have those conversations, talk to your loved ones, laugh, burn pies, spill stuff, clean it up, because that's where the memories that we pass down to the next generations come from. And a lot of memories come out of food, and food, smells, tastes. That is one thing that really does connect us and keep us connected to our culinary historical heritage. So by all means, add this pie to your list.
Thank you so much, Chef Natalie. That it was wonderful to see the demonstration, but also just to hear you talk about the importance of food. And I know we were talking a little bit before this, before we launched this Zoom call about storytelling and food and its importance. And I was wondering if you could just talk for a moment about what your journey was like going to culinary school, and how did that change your understanding of your cultural history or add to it, or
My journey through culinary school is quite hilarious. I will tell you the short version. I was a kid that was always in the kitchen, as my dad would say, playing with the food. Experimentation was my forte from the beginning. My grandmother, who, um, my grandmother had 8 children. And so on the regular basis, she was cooking for 10 people. And so her most common phrase was, get out of the kitchen, get out of the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. I understand it now because when you're cooking food for 10 people, you're busy. And the last thing you need is to have your timeline thrown off. My mother, however, was very instrumental in my experimentation. My dad would bring home stuff, my mother would let me play with it. And so that's kind of how this journey got started. I did go to, as I say, regular college, and regular college and I did not vibe so well at the beginning. And I got kicked out of college 3 times. And the last time they told me, do not come back until you are ready. Okay, understood, heard. I found out that there was a college that they served wine, and I enrolled. And because God likes to make jokes, that culinary experience put me through some of the hardest learning I have ever been through in my life. But with that learning came an understanding that food is something that brings us all together. Yes, it is cultural. And so the food that you get in Florida is different than the food that you will get in California, New York, Jamaica, England, France, all of that kind of stuff, because the people make the food. And so in connecting to the people and the people's connection to the food, we get a wealth of history that we are able to discuss in a way that is safe for people, because everybody eats. And I love Kennedy's quote that it's hard to argue when you have a piece of cornbread in your mouth. But it's also that cornbread that brings you to the table. And so grandma's making her cornbread. Everybody wants to show up and eat a piece of that cornbread. So now that we have everybody in the house, conversations can happen. Your friends come over. They're like, what's that on the stove? Oh, that's grandma's cornbread. Can I have a piece? No, we're not sharing today. Or absolutely, sit down, have a piece of the cornbread. So food ends up being an element that everybody across cultures can understand. And it allows us to have these conversations that we might not otherwise be able to have. In culinary school, you learn how food moved around the globe. And not just food, how food, wine, beverages, how all of that stuff moved across the globe, how this cultural demographic met this cultural demographic, how they came together and then possibly produced something that was new. And now that piece goes forward in history. So the historical impact of food connects us in ways that we don't even really all understand. In my research into my genealogy, into where did my people come from, um, how did I end up in the kitchen? You know, it's not something that I did not set out to be a chef by any stretch of the imagination, but food was always, always, always a part of my upbringing. And so, how did these things come into play? And part of that research led me to the plantation era. And in that research, I came to learn that the county that I grew up in, Brazoria County, was a culinary mecca. And if you were to look around today, you'd be like, what do you mean Brazoria County was a culinary mecca? Well, we have to remember that our ports were very busy ports. The people that were traveling would come in, they'd come up through the river, and they'd land in this area that's around Brazoria County. And with that being said, people needed to be fed. And the culinary greatness that was a part of the history of Brazoria County, I feel is something that is in my DNA. And with that knowledge, I have been able to go out, go forth, and help people reclaim a piece of excellence that is a part of the land. When we look at fishing, when we look at hunting, when we look at foraging, when we look at gardening, there's a space to catch the food, to grow the food, but then there's that space where you have to put that food together. And if you are not indigenous to an area, you might not know what to do with certain ingredients. And so innovation is a part of that. Knowledge, skill, things that you used back home, could they transfer to this new land, to this new world? Experimentation, huge. And out of the knowledge, the experimentation, the innovation, you begin to get culinary excellence. And in that culinary excellence, you are able to share food with a variety of people. And that piece right there really brought home the importance of the culinary field. And with that importance, I have been able to travel. I have been able to meet various people. I have been able to do an immense number of things that I maybe would not have otherwise been able to do had it not been for my culinary experience. So I definitely think that people should explore. They should explore in the kitchen. They should explore with ingredients, taste different things from different regions. You have to remember, at one point in time, wars were fought over spices. Salt was a currency, and there's a reason behind that, because if you eat food that's unsalted, it tastes one way. And when you eat salted food, it tastes completely different. So the culinary aspect is ingrained in our historical fabric. And it is important to understand that, but also to utilize that moving forward. So, how do we get spices from one place to another? How do we use spices? How do we marry different spices? How do we take food that is indigenous to, let's say, the West Coast and bring it into Central America or Central United States or Central America, either one, and make something new? Bring those things together to create food memories for people, to bring that laughter, to help you through the hard times, to make notable moments. Food is so central in all of our lives, and it is a very easy component to it's a very easy component to help us showcase who we are in a disarming way. And so that's probably what I would say about that. Experiment. Let your kids experiment. Get them their safety knives, let them cut up food. It's never too early. It's never too early to start. I had my little stool that I would push up to the stove. Depends on who I was cooking with. My auntie was like, get out of the kitchen. My mama was like, come on, pour this in the bowl, mix this. You never know what you are going to cultivate in an individual, regardless of age. Baking is something that you can take up when you're 86 years old. Um, Cooking is something that you can take up at any time. And the knowledge is out there, the skill is out there. We have more access to ingredients now than we ever had access to. So I highly recommend people get in the kitchen, play. You might create something delicious. You might create something that you have to throw in the trash can. Trust me, I've done it. But out of all of that, you create memories. And sometimes the things that end up in the trash end up being the funniest memories. You're like, oh, yeah, we can't serve that. Throw that away.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I so appreciate what you're saying about the way that food can connect us across time, across cultures, across geographic locations. It's just it's an amazing way to connect with other human beings that we have never met before. And I hope that all of us here tonight will go back after this presentation ends and we'll consider all the ways in which food has impacted our lives in these ways, and have a new appreciation for that. I certainly do, listening to you here tonight, Natalie, so thank you. We do have some
Absolutely.
questions.
Oh,
So,
nice.
are you ready for some questions?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's get with the
Um,
questions.
so, let me get to the top here. Oh, okay. So Helen is asking, her buttermilk pies are pretty good, but she has trouble getting them to set in the middle. Any tips for
Oh,
getting the pies to set in the middle?
so oven temperatures do matter. Ovens are different and can be finicky. The time to cook is a suggestion. And so on this pie, it called for a 45-minute cook time. However, on the oven that we were using, they actually ended up being in there for just a little shy of an hour. I did pull the pies when they were still a little jiggly in the middle, just maybe a quarter diameter, was still a little jiggly in the middle. It'll set. And so you can go ahead and pull it out, let it set, let it cool, and everything will come together. Keep in mind, this is a custard. And so the custard pie, it will custard and you'll be fine. But maybe just add a little bit more time. If you're feeling froggy, you may be able to kick the cooking temperature up 5 degrees.
I'm going to take this moment to go ahead and mention that Chef Natalie, actually, you can order one of her scratch-made buttermilk pies if you're in the Brazoria area. And Natalie, please correct me if I'm saying Brazoria area. I hope that that's the right
Oh, yeah, that's
geographic
fine.
location.
Brazoria
Okay.
County, Harris County.
Okay, perfect. I am actually going to share with you all a link to her website where you can order a buttermilk pie. And if you are down in her area, I hope that you do. Okay, there we go. There's the link. Because I know we all really want one now. So, so I may have to drive all the way down there just to get one.
It is worth the drive.
All right. So Linda had a question about why do you use margarine?
My auntie baked a lot, and she baked a lot. Like she baked so much that we used it as a fundraiser to send me to Europe when I was 16. And she always baked with margarine. And so that is my family history behind it. And then when I got into culinary school, somebody said, bake with margarine, cook with butter. It might be the fact that it's plant-based and it has a slightly different texture and taste with no animal components involved in it. Other than that, there's no particular reason. I have done the pie with butter. I have done the pie with margarine. I think it's great both ways. And so that is not, this pie is very versatile. So that's not something that you have to stick with one way or the other. It could also be an economics thing because margarine tends to be cheaper than butter. And so that could be a reason. But whenever I'm baking, I go margarine. Whenever I'm cooking, I go butter. And that's just that. I can't necessarily come up with any rhyme or reason to it. But you can make whatever substitutions you want. Keep in mind, cooking is about experimentation. So if you use something and you don't like it, make a note. And next time, do it the same way or do it different.
Love it. Linda, I'm also seeing your question about chilling the buttermilk pie, but I think Chef Natalie covered that. Because you were talking about putting it in the freezer and having it for later, right? So
Putting it in the freezer is solely for selfish reasons. I stuck it in the freezer to hide it from the man that is now my husband. So he would not eat it because I guarantee you this is something that you don't want to share. My dad, he is on this Zoom and he can attest to the fact that at the beginning of it, mom was making 2 to 4 pies and it got all the way up to 16 pies because we refuse to share.
yeah,
We are a family. We love each other a lot, but there are some things that we do not do, and sharing buttermilk pie is one of them. Not gonna do it. And so that's how I came up with the freezer thing, because I would take the buttermilk pies home for Thanksgiving after my mother made them. And we would eat one the day/weekend of the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. One would go home with us and it would be consumed shortly after getting back from the holidays. And then one of mine would stick in the freezer and I would nibble lightly on it throughout the rest of the year, knowing that I wasn't getting another one until Thanksgiving.
I don't blame you one bit. Sounds like
At
exactly what I
all.
would do.
At all.
Miss Phyllis has asked, is there a recommended brand and where do you get the powdered buttermilk?
So the powdered buttermilk can come from specialty stores, but you can also find it on Amazon. There is no specific recommended brand. You just want to be sure to do your due diligence from whomever you're ordering from and make sure that it is actual powdered buttermilk. But it usually is. Again, buttermilk comes from the process. It's a byproduct of making butter. And so there's plenty of butter out there. And the ability to dry the remnants, the buttermilk, I mean, that's really what it is. It's the milk that's left over from the butter. And so being able to dry that is a technological advancement that we get to enjoy these days. And so it's not brand specific.
Yeah.
And you can find it in the store or on Amazon.
And by the way, you blew everyone's mind in the chat. We were all excited about hearing about the buttermilk powder. So thank you for letting us know about that. And
So
I've
I
got
just saw something come across the chat and it said, can we use regular buttermilk? I buy mine from the store. And so, yes, you can use buttermilk from the store, but keep in mind, buttermilk from the store is not actual buttermilk. If you're getting it from a place that has raw milk, possibly you're getting actual buttermilk, but the buttermilk that you're getting in the store, it's adapted buttermilk. It works. It works. My mother used it. One of the reasons that I shifted to the powdered buttermilk was because I did a grocery order and had buttermilk on my grocery order and they substituted low fat buttermilk. Don't even know why that's a thing or why it exists. But they did, and it ruined everything. And so to keep that headache off of my plate, I made the switch to powdered buttermilk. But by all means, you can get the buttermilk that is at the store and you can use that. But do not use low fat buttermilk. Do not. It will not work. Won't work.
Heard. Um, so we have a question from Deborah, and I wonder maybe even site staff might want to join in providing an answer to this one. Deborah's coming to us from Minnesota, and she's asking where the enslaved people would get this recipe. But I think a broader question would be, where did those who were enslaved get recipes? Can some of whoever wants to answer that speak to that?
I'll do it.
Okay.
So, the buttermilk pie recipe is not necessarily, correct me where I'm wrong, Natalie, is not from in the enslaved time period. But if you're talking about the whole concept of what is soul food, you have to keep in mind that soul food is something that's very innovative, and it comes out of adapting to your surroundings. And soul food is not just doesn't have just its West African influence, but it also has influences that are indigenous. It has influences that are, of course, European, depending on what type of spices you're using. And then those are like the main big three. But when it comes to African American history in general, after post emancipation, that's where you start seeing the adaptions and the using of different recipes that weren't necessarily from the slave times, but it's as we've migrated throughout the United States, we take on different recipes and we adapt them to our taste buds. So that's kind of what I mean by soul food is very adaptive. As I've read through my research, that's what stuck out to me and that I was able to interpret. Now, when it comes to passing around recipes during enslavement, it would just be the easiest way I can give it to you is an example. The easiest way I can explain it is an example. You have to remember that a lot of people think that when you have a plantation that the wealth is in the land, but the wealth is actually in the people, because the people, those enslaved individuals, have all this knowledge. And so with your enslaved individual being the most valuable thing on your plantation, not to be too graphic, but as they were unable to do field work or some domestic duties, you didn't necessarily always wanted to get rid of them. You can do what you want with that description. I'm trying to keep it very neutral to not trigger anyone. But there will be times that an elder enslaved person who was too old to do any intense physical labor, they would keep them around and they would be responsible for cooking for people or cooking for the enslaved community. So as people age and like they still have lives, these were still social beings. After they're done working in the fields, they come back and they're eating. You have one enslaved person who will be in charge of cooking for everyone. And when there are children, depending on what plantation you are, like on the Varner-Hogg plantation, if you're under the age of 12, you weren't allowed to work. So with all that information in mind, you can say that there are scenarios where you have the oldest enslaved person in the community or the group of the youngest enslaved people still together. And as the mom and the dad are out in the fields working, you have the elder and the youngster coming together to say, hey, I'm cooking for us. Go to the milk lady and get some milk. Well, why do we need the milk? We're using the milk to make this. And then that's kind of how you start passing around, you start developing those recipes. It's, oh, this is how so-and-so cooked it. This is how granddaddy cooked it. And this is how I cook it. And I like to do it this way, so I add this to it. So hopefully, I know that was still very vague, but hopefully that kind of answers. It was very oral. No one was writing it down, and it comes from an older person or whoever is in that dynamic of looking up to that person, teaching another person, this is how you cook it, this is how you prepare it.
I think that was a wonderful description. Thank you so much, Kennedy.
You're welcome.
Heavy on the recipes were oral, very heavy on that.
I would have been terrible at that because my brain cannot hold on to information. So
But interestingly enough, a lot of recipes ended up getting lost that way. And even for my grandparents, like I cannot find her tea cake recipe anywhere. Her peach cobbler, nobody's been able to recreate it. So recipes did get lost because they were in their heads, they were oral. And so for this recipe, not every measurement had to be exact, but for some recipes, the measurements need to be exact, or it's going to be off just that little bit. With the allspice that is in this recipe, I believe that the reason we ended up with allspice in this recipe is because my mama didn't have cinnamon or nutmeg on hand. And she looked in the pantry. It was probably late because she made them lots of times in the later evening. And she was like, allspice. And it turned out to yield a wonderful product. So again, the adaptation, the innovation, the what's on hand. And also keep in mind, if you go back far enough, grocery stores aren't a thing. They're not a thing. And so you have access to what you have access to. And being able to make the food work with what you have access to is an important piece of culinary innovation.
Definitely. There's a question in the chat from a participant asking about if you have books that you would recommend on research about cultural cooking. And if you can't think of them right now, you can email them to me after this Zoom, and I can include them in that email I'm going to send out tomorrow to everybody. So
that part I can do.
Okay, so Phyllis, we'll think about that and we'll put it in our follow-up email. And Kennedy, if you've got suggestions, please go
I have
ahead.
3 off the top of my head. I would say Michael Tweedy's The Cooking Gene. His is very interesting because, of
I
course,
do love that book.
he's not necessarily just talking about, it's not just recipes, but he's talking about his heritage and his family genealogy and how, and the research that he's done along the way. So that's a good book. And then I love Toni Tipton Martin, her 2 books. One is Jubilee. And what I like about the Jubilee cookbook is that it gives you the recipe, and then on the side, it talks about why it's significant to Black history, culture, however you want to put it. And it also talks to you about the significance, like, so the hibiscus drink, if you have Mexican friends, they might call it Jamaica. If you have Caribbean friends, hopefully Mel does not come for me because I always butcher the name, but it's sorrel. I remember I was learning about it and I was very excited and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to cook this. And I was telling my Caribbean friends and they were like, girl, we only drink this around Christmas time. And I was like, what? Well, it's in the cookbook. I thought it was normal. And I'm in the South, like, I'm gonna drink it now. And then when you look at Jubilee, it tells you more about, oh, this is where it comes from. This is the time they would drink it. So those are 2 really good cookbooks that I recommend about just like African American culinary history. And then Toni Tipton Martin, she has the Jemima Code. And that's not a cookbook, but it just talks about the history and how it talks about Black culinary history in general and how it's built itself up over time and where the influences come from. And then High on a Hog. High on a Hog, you
Love that
probably
one.
heard about the series on Netflix, but it's also a book. So those are 4 good resources.
Okay, and for everybody who was trying to find a pen so that you could write that down, I'm going to include that in the email I send out tomorrow. So
I'll send it to you with links.
awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was a great question. We have another great question from Alexis, who's asking Chef Natalie, asking you, what inspired you to decide on this pie for a day of remembrance?
Short answer, my mother's death. Couldn't get it anymore. Really wanted it. Had to learn how to make it. Very emotional journey as far as that goes along. And being a descendant of the Levi Jordan, being the culinary expert for the Day of Remembrance last year and this year, that descendant tie, that culinary heritage, keeping my mother's memory alive, those pieces are what brought that into the forefront here. And then the conversations that were had around it. and discovering that a lot of people didn't even know about it. People get into pumpkin pie, sweet potato pie, pecan pie, all the pies, but then you find out that a lot of people do not necessarily are not necessarily familiar with the buttermilk pie. And it was a hit, and people were literally trying to walk away with full pies last year. And it was one of those things where we're like, okay, let's bring this to the forefront. Let's talk about it. Let's let a pie that is simple in its ingredients but exquisite in its taste take the table and shine. And so that's how that one came about.
Thank you, Chef Natalie. Deborah's the same person who asked an earlier question. Thanks you for the perspective that you're giving her, and I'm sure we all feel that way on this call. But she has a follow-up question, and again, maybe for site staff to answer as well. Would the lady of the house, and I guess this is referring to the plantation owner's lady of the house, share her recipes with her cook?
So from the research I found, something that makes the enslaved cooks so unique is that not only are they responsible for, depending on how the plantation is, each plantation is different. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. And what I mean by that is like, it's just like our homes. You have friends where you can walk throughout their house with their shoes on. And you have some friends when you visit their homes, you can't do that. Every plantation is different. And so what I found from, going back to the point, what I found throughout my research is that an enslaved cook will be responsible for not just cooking for the enslaver and their family and their guests, any guests they may have, but they are also responsible sometimes for preparing meals for the enslaved community. With that being said, your enslaved cook, their team, the enslaved people who are in charge, who had to work in the kitchen, sometimes the enslaved cook was one of the few people who were enslaved who knew how to read and write. And that's because if the mistress of the plantation, so the lady of the plantation, if she comes to you and she says, hey, I want this for dinner, fix it, you're expected to fix it. And then sometimes throughout the research, we saw things where the mistress will say, I want this is how we make it. And she'll explain it. I don't know if it's in detail, people weren't there to document that, but they'll say, I want this, use these ingredients, make this like this. And the enslaved person and their team will say, yeah, we'll do that. And as soon as they walk away, they start adding their own things to it, and they do it to, you also have to remember that they're cooking to taste. So basically, to answer your question, sometimes they were just given a piece of paper or a recipe and told to cook something. And then sometimes they were told, this is what I want you to make. This is how you make it. And that also goes back to having that elder enslaved person where they are also responsible for training the next person, where they're saying, this is how Master so-and-so likes it, cook it like this. If you're cooking it for them, cook it like this. If you're cooking this for the holidays, this is how you do it. So that goes back to the passing of recipes being oral, and that goes back to sometimes your enslaved person knows how to read and write.
Thank you, Kennedy.
You're welcome.
So at this time, we've gone through the Q&A that's in the chat, and we have a little bit of time left in our Zoom tonight. And I wanted to invite our community who's on our call with us tonight to maybe come off mute and share a story of a recipe that's in your family or in your culture that means something important to you. Do I have any volunteers? Deborah, I can see you came off mute. Would you like to participate? Site staff, you can answer this question too. I'm surprised. I think everyone's being shy. I know there are some recipes and stories in this community tonight. Raylyn, I see you came off mute. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I do. You mentioned tea cakes, and my family has a tea cake recipe, and great grandmother made them. And one day, mom made her make 3 batches, and mom measured out. Grandmother got a handful. Mom took her hand and measured what was in her hand, and now we have that recipe because It was all just in great grandmother's head. And she just, I mean, she could make them in her sleep, but no one else
Yeah.
could. But now we can.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
going back to that, what's been passed down orally and perhaps lost through generations. Thank you for sharing. Patricia.
Yeah, it's not exactly as long ago a history as everybody's talking about, but my mother passed away in March, and it all of this year, and all the holidays, she always made the deviled eggs. And while I watched her make the deviled eggs, I didn't get any kind of recipe from her. So I know what goes in them, but I'm not real clear on the quantities. So and I got elected to try to do it for this month. So it's going to be an experiment. But we've all laughed that we're never going to match hers because she could dice stuff up so tiny that I just don't think I can do it that small. But it brings back memories of her. So
Yeah, that's an excellent story. And I was actually going to talk about deviled eggs also. So I'm glad you brought that up. I similar in the sense that my mom would just find what was in the cabinet to spice up the deviled eggs. And so they were different every single time. So it's more like an experience of a deviled egg rather than a consistent recipe. But good luck with doing that this holiday season, Patricia, and let me know how it goes. I'm sure it's going to be great. Let's
But
see.
even to piggyback on that piece, I can cook from recipes, and I anytime I make a dish for the first time, I do cook from a recipe. And this goes back to the soul food versus Southern food versus all the other foods that are out there. The food is alive. It has a spirit. It has an energy. And so sometimes I've got all of the ingredients together to make this recipe, and I go to put something in, and the food is like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, what do you mean, no? And their food is like, no, we don't want that. And so that ingredient does not go into the recipe. And so the love that your mother put into the deviled eggs is the thing that you should lead with. The love that your grandma put into the tea cakes is the thing that you should lead with. And then the experience that happens around eating that is what will continue to keep the memory alive for you and for future generations. We talk a lot about recipes, but to me, with the exception of baking and when it comes to mixing eggs and flour, cooking is experimental. There is room to shift and grow and make adjustments. And so, yes, we get locked down into recipes, but for me, recipes are a suggestion. And so I make chili. I make delicious chili, but my chili might be a little bit different every single time I make it. It's still delicious. People are still going to rave about it, eat it, want to take it home, do all the things. But I may have used smoked paprika or Hungarian paprika instead of Californian paprika. So you do not have to be married to one specific thing.
Yeah, I as somebody who has dyslexia, I sometimes refer to a philosophy of letters, and I feel that way about foods. It's a
Mhm.
philosophy of a deviled egg. It's the concept of that thing, and then it's all the pieces that go into making it fill out the story of that food, the moment, the context, the people, the spices. Okay, I see that Dorothy H has been waiting patiently. So
Hey guys, how are you? Chef Natalie, first of all, thank you for giving us those stories and the recipe. And God bless you and your family for doing that with us tonight. And so you were talking about making memories. Now, don't y'all laugh at me too hard. So I have a nemesis, and my nemesis is macaroni and cheese.
Uh,
I have literally had my grandmother, my aunts, my former mother-in-law stand right next to me and coach me through this entire thing. Because, like you say, there's no precise measurements. We're just doing stuff, and they're right there. put it in the oven. I don't know what happens. It comes out and everybody goes, "What is that?" Every single time for 7 years straight, I never got it right. It was so bad that my children finally just said, "Mom, just stop. Just buy the box. Let it go. It's not your thing." And they're all adults now, and they still tell these stories to this day that Mom
Oh,
cannot cook macaroni and cheese. So I have my story. That's my nemesis. And if anybody has any suggestions other than Dorothy, just go buy it, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you,
oh.
Dorothy. I love that story so much. Thank you for sharing that.
My nemesis is rice. I cannot cook rice on the stove. Can't do it. Have to have a rice cooker. And so I
That's
don't
my
even
daughter.
try. I don't even try. I'm like, nope, I am not your chef. If you want rice, I'm not it. Yeah, so everybody has their thing and it does happen. Um, Not sure where you're going astray on it, but maybe you just find your own type of macaroni and cheese recipe. The cheese is key. The cream is key. The noodles can be played with a little bit here and there. You don't necessarily have to bake it. And so maybe instead of adapting what they're trying to, I tell my husband this all the time. And he was like, da 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 da, do this. And I'm like, okay. And so then I go and do that the way that I know how to do it. I cannot do anything the way that my husband does it because I don't have his brain. I have my brain. So maybe the flaw is you trying to do it their way instead of you trying to do it your way. And so you get in the kitchen with a variety of cheeses, start how they melt. Like, just how does the cheese melt? Is that the consistency that you want? Play with the noodles. Is that the carrier that you want for the cheese? Play with the flavor. Play with thickeners. Do you need them? Do you not? Do you need eggs? Do you not? And so just play with it until you find what works for you. Because you might not be able to make the recipe because there's a way that people handle themselves in the kitchen, and you can watch somebody, they can tell you how to do it, all the things, but it may not cross over to your brain. And so it's not necessarily a stop for you, but it might just be something that you've got to get in there, play with, experiment with, and then at the end of the day be like, this is Dorothy's mac and cheese. Dorothy's mac and cheese. If y'all want somebody else's mac and cheese, go get it. But this is Dorothy's mac and cheese. Don't buy the store bought.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna tell my kids that Chef Natalie said I could do it my way.
You can do it your way, baby.
Thank you.
So empowering. I love it. Terry, I see that you have raised your hand. There was somebody who was going to come off mute. So maybe I'll come back to you, Terry, if that's okay. Ruth, I saw you pop off mute. So we'll get to Ruth and then we'll go to Terry.
Okay, well, I had a German grandma who came from Germany in 1928 and could cook and bake like you just wouldn't believe. And so as a teenager, I was interested in food and cooking, and I wanted to learn how to do that. And so she let me observe doing Hefekrans one time, only one time, because it did not go well. Because she pulled out the old German cookbooks that had come with her. And if you know anything, I could speak German and I could read German, but if you know anything about German, there's an old script and then there's modern script. And of course, the cookbooks were all written in old script, and reading that is a whole different ballgame. And I said, well, I can't really, it's really hard to read, in tiny print. And she said, well, just watch me. So here I am, I've got a piece of paper and I'm trying to write things down. And so I'd ask her, now, how much was that? Well, until it looks like, or it fills your hand, or and, and pretty soon she was frustrated and I was frustrated and I just gave up. And I have never found a recipe that would ever taste like hers. Now I've found some recently because we have the internet. But it was so frustrating to want to learn something and for it to be so much her own and something that she just did so automatically that she just really didn't even need the book. I think she opened the cookbooks just because I was there, you know. And that was hard. And so I didn't get that wonderful bonding experience quite that I was hoping for, but I've found a recipe for hefekrans and now that I'm going to try and see if I can get something close to what she made.
It's still a great story, and I love the image of trying to measure with hands.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, Ruth. Terry, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can go right ahead.
Yes, one of the things for me that's we talked about memories and person's talking about rice. And you couldn't make rice. One of the things
Can't
that's a
make it.
staple here in my house, um, growing up, we grew up on what's called sweet rice for breakfast. And that's all that we ever grew up on it, and we all loved it. And my ex-wife, her mother-in-law made it just so delicious, and now she makes it, and now wherever we go, and then these are the memories. No matter where we are, at home, out of town, whatever, she's on rice duty. For breakfast every morning. She's on rice duty, and everybody loves it. Um, they be like, "What's sweet rice? We never heard of sweet rice." And once they taste it, oh, they're hooked. They just want to keep eating it and eating it. So those are the things that um, they develop memories for us as a family. And my son, he thinks he said, "Mom, I think I got your recipe now. I think I got your recipe now." So he's always trying, but yeah, that's a good staple for us. And again, it's developing memories for us. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Love sweet rice. Sweet rice and sugar grits, man.
Oh, yeah. Sweet rice and some biscuits. Yes.
Oh, yeah. With some salty bacon. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, this is making me hungry.
And you talked about the powdered um
Buttermilk.
I'm sorry.
The powdered buttermilk.
Yeah, the powdered buttermilk, and it almost made me cringe because I grew up on powdered milk and powdered eggs. But when you told me that the powdered buttermilk is actually buttermilk and the powdered milk is not, so
Yeah.
that kind of brought back some memories there as well.
The powdered buttermilk is the actual dehydrated buttermilk from the byproduct of making the butter. And the buttermilk that we're used to seeing in the grocery store is cream that has had an acid added to it to create the consistency and the taste. Don't make that face, Christy. It's still good. It's still good. It's still good, but it's not authentic buttermilk. It's an alternative that the food industry has come up with that works. It 100% works. That has been a thing in the culinary world forever. You've got cream, you've got vinegar, because again, those would be staples that were in the kitchen. You can mix them together. You can make buttermilk. It's the precursor to making cheese. So those raw ingredients were there. But with the powdered buttermilk, it is actually the dehydrated byproduct of making butter, which is the buttermilk. And so it's not like the powdered eggs. It's not like the powdered milk. It's kind of like being flour, you know, it's a staple that's there and it's just dehydrated, but it works wonderful, 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 wonderful. I too was skeptical the first time I heard about it. I was like, no way. But then I've started using it and it stays in the pantry, stays in the pantry, never goes bad.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more comment and then one more question. The question was, do you have a cookbook, Chef Natalie? Maybe
Miss
forthcoming
Kennedy,
someday.
Miss Kennedy is working with me to get one written, and so it is in the pipeline.
I love that so much. So thank you to whoever asked that question. And when we find out about it, we will post about it on our website. So
Thank you.
or on our social media. So please follow the Friends of the THC for updates about that, or you can always just email me directly. And one last comment from our community. I see that Sherry has come off mute. So Sherry, you'll be our last commenter for this evening, and then we will wrap up. So go ahead, Sherry.
I was just going to comment on the pinch of this and a handful of that. My grandmother was always real big on that, and we were always trying to get her to, write it down. Tell us, how about, because your hand's bigger than mine, that kind of thing. But anyway, she made a sweet potato pie one time and told me it was pumpkin pie because I would not eat sweet potato pie. I thought that was just gross sounding. So anyway, after I ate that pie, I thought, oh my gosh, that's the best pumpkin pie you've ever made. And so then she told me it was actually sweet potato pie. So I made her actually take her handful of this or a pinch of that and put it in, an actual cup or a measuring spoon so I could get the real recipe down. But it still doesn't taste like hers. Yeah.
That's the love part, or the intangible part, right?
Right.
The love, the pan, the spoon, the
Yeah.
oven, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
I have thoroughly enjoyed this.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Sherry. Yeah, and I was going to tell you, Chef Natalie, I know you haven't had the opportunity to see all the love that's in the chat for this program tonight, but everyone super appreciates all that you've shared with us tonight. And we
Thank
are
you.
also grateful to our site staff for joining us and educating us about the things that we can learn by visiting the Levi Jordan. I'm saying it wrong. It's Jordan. Levi Jordan plantation and the Varner-Hogg plantation. And I hope that if you are down in South Texas, that you will visit these sites and learn more from our site educators and interpreters. There's a world of stories there to be discovered. And join them for a day of remembrance and meet folks like Chef Natalie, who add modern day pieces to the story of the sites. And we're grateful to know those pieces as well. So thank you, everyone. And as I mentioned, watch for my follow-up email where I will send you a link to tonight's presentation. And I will also send you the resources that Kennedy mentioned. And we will keep you posted about Chef Natalie's book. And we'll have her back on for another program in the future to show us more wonderful things. So thank you all for being with us tonight. And I hope to see you at the next virtual event. Take care. Bye.